Let's now deal with instalment warrants. Instalment warrants are a form of lending which is permitted by the superannuation fund to take on. As you know, superannuation funds are not permitted to have debt, only in certain limited circumstances, and instalment warrants were brought about as a ways of allowing superannuation funds to borrow money to get into and get into some assets that they could not usually afford. They're generally promoted by financial advisors, and they're used by financial advisors to allow clients to buy into assets which they could not normally afford. Generally and historically, they've been used to acquire shares or units in publicly listed managed funds as a means of ramping up the assets in the fund quite quickly. It's usual for these to be self-funding, that is, the returns on the investments would fund the interest on the amount borrowed, and the profit is made out of capital gain. And so where there's little capital growth, which is what's been the case during the global financial crisis, it's been a little bit rocky and a little bit difficult to manage. The assets are held on trust, which is the way it works. They're not held within the superannuation fund, but they're held within a trust outside the superannuation fund, where the debt is also held. Once the instalments or the debt has been repaid in full to the lender, the super fund can then take those assets and hold them in its own right. Should things go not to plan, the assets are the only recourse that the lender has in order to satisfy the outstanding debt. It can't flow back to the superannuation fund. The instalment warrant arrangements are generally very broad, and they're not limited just to shares or derivative-based investment products, but also other assets such as real property can be acquired. Residential housing or factories or commercial buildings can also be acquired in this way. Though the rules have allowed this to happen, in reality it's been hard to find self-managed super fund trustees who actually want to be bothered with it, and it's been most difficult during the GFC to find lenders that are willing to lend money under these arrangements during the global financial crisis. The lenders are now willing to lend. Some of them will lend at 20% deposit and at 80%, or some 30% and some at 40% deposit. It's been my experience that the higher the deposit the super fund has, the greater the positive response is from the lender to enter into these arrangements. It's been also my experience that in order to make the arrangements work freely and without too much difficulty, the whole thing needs to be positively geared. You shouldn't be putting in contributions or making transfers out of your super fund over the trust every month in order to make the repayments on the debt. It just doesn't work that way, and it's not good, because trustees generally forget or something else may go wrong, and then the lending company becomes all huffy and puffy and the whole thing can blow up in your face. So it's better if it's positively geared if possible. Great care needs to be taken before entering into the contracts. APRA has sent out some warnings that these contracts should not be used for investments that are speculative. They've listed some insight on what they consider to be speculative, and the government has also just announced its views to tighten up the area. This is not law yet, and it may not become law, but this is what they're thinking, and these are the main points that the government is espousing at this time. That number one, only holders of Australian financial services licences can advise and implement on these structures. only a single asset or a collection of identical assets can be held per warrant or per agreement. This becomes a problem where warrants are held for a parcel of shares. I bet this one gets altered a little bit because they may change the wording around from identical assets to identical classes of assets. So in other words, you could hold a parcel of shares rather than one share in one company, or you could hold a parcel of properties rather than just one sole property. And of course, refinancing now is now available, which is good. It wasn't offered before. Once you're in a contract with a lender, you were locked in. You couldn't refinance. Guarantors cannot seek any indemnity from the fund if losses are incurred. Though this has always been the case, some lenders were putting in clauses in the agreements which could be considered to be a guarantee from the superannuation fund, which was not lawful. And so the government is going to tighten that up to make sure that there can be no comeback to the super fund should the whole arrangement within the trust fall over. Assets cannot be replaced, so if you want to make a change, you need to close down one and open up another warrant. And of course, this is not retrospective when the government puts it in legislation, except for some parts which are items 3, 4 and 5 above. 3 being refinancing is allowable, no personal guarantees, and the assets cannot be replaced. It could be considered that those items may be made retrospective. We'll see that, time will tell. Bit of a watch this space. So in summary, it's a great opportunity to quickly ramp up your assets. If you want to do that at a time when interest rates are not stable, but also while assets are down, and you want to buy a lot of BHP shares or a lot of Woolworths shares or a lot of Wesfarmers or whatever while the prices are down, then it's a good opportunity to do this. Also to buy property, but to be truthful, I don't have a lot of clients that have investments using instalment warrants. Thank you.